Welcome to our session on data collection and telling our story. I'm Michelle Goaley from MAISA, and I'm going to have my partner introduce herself here too.
I'm Tracy Novak, an instructional coach through Bay Aranac ISD.
And there is a bit.ly on the screen right now. If you were to type that into your browser, you would get the folder that has everything we're going to talk about today. Lots of samples and templates. It will also be linked for you in the agenda, so you'll have the resources. But the bit.ly might be the easiest way to grab it right now if you want it. All right, so some of the work we're going to talk about today is really answering the question of how do we know that coaching is working? So that's a big question, and we're going to look at a couple different ways that we can provide evidence and support and data around the success of coaching in the context in which you are experiencing your work. So we're going to start off by working on some data collection opportunities that MAISA is offering. We're going to explore with Tracy, explore formats for coaching logs, coaching plans, reports, perception data. And then I'm going to kind of take you through at the end ways that you can tell your story. It's your story to tell as far as the coaching work, and we really want to promote it and support it as a united front. So we've got some projects in the works and how we're going to be able to do that. All right, so we're going to start with our MAISA coaching cycle data project. So over the past 3 years, Dr. Susan Lallier has been working with this network in collecting coaching cycle data. So what we did was, I worked with Dr. Lallier over the past month. We took her executive summaries of all the reports that she pulled together, and we created kind of a simplified document to help us share what that data has shown. So really the overview, which I've got up here on the screen, it examines the impact of coaching cycles on student learning and teacher practice across the state over the past 3 years. This is something that's going to provide a summary of participation across the state, as well as the data collected and the results. So a coaching cycle is defined, as you know, as a collaboration between a coach and a teacher that includes goal setting, co-planning, implementation, and reflection around a specific literacy practice or curricular resource. In some coaching cycles, the coach works with more than one teacher, okay? So over the past 3 years, what did the data show? Those two big key findings on the screen are very important in thinking about data collection. Number one, that in order to see students meet or exceed expectations, the teacher and the coach need to use assessment data and define what that data is before they start the cycle, and then to revisit that data at the end of the cycle to look at what happened with student outcomes. So that really specific attention to data. We're going to talk about what kind of data and in all the different areas of literacy, but the idea that we're collecting the data, determining what the criteria is for success, and then we're revisiting that at the end of the cycle. The other piece that is huge is we have to track our time coaching. If we aren't tracking coaching cycle time and professional learning time, we aren't able to get that full picture of how much support was offered to that teacher or provided to that teacher in order to see the growth that we want to see. So the data, as we collected it, based on the research as well, is that it takes 14 to 20 hours of support with a teacher to see student outcomes improve. That does not mean you're coaching 14 to 20 hours per teacher. It means that in the whole setting of professional learning provided to that teacher on that specific literacy topic, the teacher has spent 14 to 20 hours. So let's say they're getting some really specific professional learning and they have a full day on it. That's 6 to 7 hours of professional learning. Then you add that to your coaching cycle. Then you add your PLC time. Then you add independent learning they may have done as far as modules and, things like that, article reading, that more in-depth piece. So you think about today and some of what you learned from Dr. Tortorelli. She provided a whole lot more for you to dig into. So we got an hour with her, and then we might spend with a group listening to that podcast another 90 minutes, and then some reflection time. And then we start a coaching cycle around it. So you see that is like the big picture, the 14 to 20 hours. But if we're not tracking how we're supporting teachers, we don't have that gauge of time provided for support. So this is some of the data that came out of the past 3 years. So you can see we've sorted it by how many reports were submitted. Those who submitted reports all are coaches from the coaching network. So the first year there were 27, the second year 44, and last year there were 94 reports submitted. Now, based on the criteria in which Dr. Lallier needs to have an actual research-based study, some of them we couldn't use in the data. So you can see that second number there. To have all the required components, you can see what numbers were there. So we had about 79 last year. So there are 56 ISDs in the state of Michigan. 11 participated the first year, 6 the second year, and 14 the third year. So part of my reflection as an ISD leader for the past 7 years really was I didn't necessarily understand or know about how important it was to submit this data, or how important it was to have the conversations with my coaches to say, what is some data that we could submit that would represent the work we're doing? So this conversation is gonna happen in February at our GELN network. So all of our gen ed directors from all of our ISDs will hear the same message you're hearing today about the data collection piece. And the ask will be that they help support this work by working with coaches and submitting that data. So then if you just kind of keep looking down here at our table, look at the number of teachers, coaches, teachers, and students. So we'll just go with the 23-24 school year. 29 coaches submitted coaching cycle data. So there's about 600 in our network, and we usually have 450 at our quarterly meetings. So we really want to see more representation from the hard work that you're doing. So that will be kind of part of the ask as well, as more coaches submitting that data. And then you can see teachers and students, and then the average hours spent in the coaching cycle. So you can see we range from 12 to 15. And the impact on student learning. The first year, there were 86% of students in those reports submitted met or exceeded expectations. Those were the expectations set by the coach and teacher working together on that specific cycle. So this is not common data. This is criteria set within the coaching cycle. And then we see around 70% the last 2 years. So curious, I asked Dr. Lallier, why was it higher that first year? Like, what do you think? And she said, we had a lot more data and explicit phonics instruction that year. And the more intentional we were with our explicit phonics instruction data collection, the better our students did. She said, when we added things like writing instruction, and other components of literacy, the criteria and the data source aren't as concrete. So you think about some of those assessments around phonics, they're much more black and white. Do they have it or don't they have it? But when you start with a writing rubric, you see there's that subjectivity. So she said, we really had more black and white data around explicit phonics instruction. So just kind of a curiosity I had that I thought was interesting. And then this past year, there was specific data collected on teacher practice as well. Not just student outcomes, but changes in teacher practice. And we also saw 70% who were meeting or exceeding the expectations on that. if you were to click on this PDF, which I'll have Liberty just open it up so we can take a look at it. The ask is, there's 4 steps here on this document. First, we're asking for everyone involved in coaching to understand and implement coaching cycles or a coaching model. So if you're coaching 1 day a week at a building, we may consider a better model based on the research to be, can we do a 6-week, 4 to 6 week cycle with the teacher or in a building before we move on? So just thinking about scheduling, thinking about what research shows about coaching and what we're gonna share with general ed leadership and your coach coordinators is, these are some things we want you to consider. Like, is your coach being utilized in the most effective setting? Then we're gonna have them talk to coach coordinators. So the ask is, are we doing coaching cycles? Are we collecting data? Are we submitting our data to MAISA? If no, why not? Why aren't we doing that? No teacher identifiable information will be in any of this data. It's really to examine the impact of coaching cycles. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. And then, are we tracking time spent? So number 3 would be, track that time. Are we using a coaching log? We've got samples in here that you may have seen in the past as part of the network. There's a coaching log, a companion guide. You received a handout on my Coach Compass, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's a very easy platform to track coaching within that you wouldn't have to be using a spreadsheet anymore. It's really easy to use, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then there are ISDs across the state that have already invested in platforms and portals where they're tracking data already. We don't want anybody to change what they're doing if it's working. We just want to know that time is being spent tracking how we're coaching. And then the commitment to submitting the reports is that section number 4. So there are templates and guidelines that align to one another. If you're using a model like Diane Sweeney, you probably are already doing this. We would just ask that you submit that and add your coaching time to that. So it would not be a bigger ask than what you might already be doing. And then we did put some additional resources and support. Thinking about the No More Random Acts of Coaching book. So as people are learning, you're onboarding new coordinators, or you're onboarding new coaches, that's a great resource. Also, the session that Dr. Lallier does here in the pathway, I linked the PDF of that because it does take you all the way through the coaching cycle work. And if you scroll down, this is what you're gonna get some time to examine this at your tables. But this is the data that's been collected in the past. So this is what coaches have determined with teachers they wanted to use for their coaching cycle data collection. So we've got the focus areas on the left, so phonemic awareness and phonics. You can see there's a good 7 or 8 different assessments that were submitted based on the context of the district and the classroom and access to the assessments that they might have. But this would give you a better idea of what you might consider in a coaching cycle if that's the focus area. And Liberty, if you just kind of scroll through it a little bit, you see there's high frequency words, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, writing, spelling, even attitude toward reading, and student engagement, independence. All things we talked about today through our different speakers and some of the assessment tools that were mentioned today as well. We will talk a little bit about my Coach Compass after Tracy shares really the story of the ISD she's in and how they collect data. But those one-pagers, take those back to your ISDs, talk to your coach coordinator, talk to your GELN representative. It's probably director or assistant soup at your ISD. Because if we can all share the same message, we're much more likely to get the nod to move forward together. So appreciate the advocacy.
All right. So in our ISD, we service a couple different districts, and so we actually have five coaches, that we all use the same method to track our coaching, but the forms look a little different. So we're collecting the same types of data, but it looks a little different. So I'm going to start by just sharing how we start our process of tracking our coaching, and then a little bit about our how we collect our local data, and then creating a coaching report that also involves the feedback from our teachers. That then the ultimate end goal is that we actually create a plan that we share with our district leaders, and we actually have it shared with our superintendent at the ISD as well. This is just a sample of one way that we can track our data. So this allows us to track the amount of time. So it's just a drop down in 15-minute increments. Then it allows you to pick your grade, the essentials, and then your type of coaching. So there's a lot of quick drop downs, and the longer we used it, the more familiar we became, and it goes pretty quickly. And then this was a great tool that I actually liked when we started this, because what I found my first year coaching was that I was putting what I'm doing with my teachers here, and then I also had a separate folder that I was also like, here's your coaching form, the Jill Jackson forms, that I was tracking all of this, and I'm like, this is redundant for me. So I actually loved that this was here. This form is not shared with anyone outside of our coaching at the ISD, so it's my personal one, and I share it obviously with my supervisor, and up the chain a little bit there. The other example at the bottom you'll see that it's tracked by school, and then also at the district. What we were finding was that, yes, we're working in our schools. Many of us are split across multiple schools, some across multiple districts. So having a way to keep track is easier than putting it all in one form. What we also found, though, is that we're doing some of our district work. We have regular meetings with our curriculum director. We have meetings with our superintendent of the district. So how are we tracking that? If we're doing district-provided PD, that's larger than just our building. So we found that having that district tab allowed us to kind of fit more information that our district wanted to see. Over the course of time, we've modified this as well. Currently, if you were to look at the second example, along the bottom where it says the school in the district, I've actually made it individual teacher tabs. And the reason that I made that change, you'll see when we get to the coaching report, it just made what I'm sharing out with my district leaders a little bit easier for me. Another conversation that we've had about this is not all of our coaching fits nicely into one essential. Dr. Tortorelli noted that today, just talking about 4 or 5. If you're looking at, well, I use this bullet from this essential and this bullet from this essential, it's not always easy. And so over the course of time, some of us have taken out that essential drop down and just put it in the notes, what you're working on, if you're working across multiple pieces. Something that is helpful too is the summary page. So people much smarter than I am in Excel created this, so I'm not taking any credit. But as you start jotting down and using the drop downs, it actually pre-populates the grade level, what essential, and how many of each coaching types we've used, which makes when I create my end of the year report much easier. So just another thing to catch up on if you wanted to see those, and that's on both pages. So, okay. If we go back to the slides. So if we've tracked our coaching, this is just a way, again, it's not streamlined, it is that spreadsheet, so it's a little bit cumbersome. If you are using this or haven't used something and you're looking, get in the habit of using it every day. Backtracking's not fun. But the other piece that we look at, so it's easy to track your coaching if you're having those, if you're going in modeling, if you're observing, if you're offering support during PLCs, that we're all tracking those. But the biggest piece that especially we've been talking about today is looking at our data. What are we using to drive those coaching instruction or coaching cycles? So we talked a little bit at the table during our breakout that what that looks like can vary by district and by building, because we don't all have access to the same curriculum. We might not even have a solid phonics curriculum. So if you don't have those pieces and you don't have a curriculum that comes with assessing, what are we using? In our area, we have 3 assessments that are used at the district level: NWEA, which many people are familiar with, FastBridge, and Acadience. These assessments are given 3 times a year, and then we look at that growth piece, and that's how a lot of our coaching cycles are coming about. It's not fine-tuning a little bit like some of the phonics screeners would be doing if you're just coaching around phonics, but it gives us a starting point. In our district, we look at NWEA, which is given 3 times a year, and it focuses on the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding their growth goal. If you're not familiar with that NWEA, each growth goal is individualized by the student, and then they also have the RIT score, which is aligned with norms. And so when we meet with teachers around our data meetings, we're talking about where are they, what percentile? Did they grow in their overall score? Did they grow in their percentile score? And where are they compared to the norm? So this is just a sample, 2 different samples actually, of what our NWEA report looks like when we're looking at it at the end of the year. So you can see in the green boxes, teacher A at the top is showing that 87.5% of her students met or exceeded their goal at the end of the school year. So that's great. NWEA's recommendation is that you're with about 50 to 55% of your students. So if you're below that, that's less than half your class is not showing that they're growing in meeting that goal. So then teacher B, as you can see, is just under. So when we look at that and take that into consideration, we're going to look at what did it look like with their coaching. We know that there are other outliers. Coaching is we're not responsible for all of it, but we do have an impact on the student growth. So taking both of those, so taking all of the coaching that you tracked on the first spreadsheet, taking what your local data looks like, we've created this tracking report that we actually share with our building leaders and then our district leaders as well. And it is completely anonymous, which we appreciate. So I'm going to just kind of walk through a little bit of how this came to be and why our district leaders love this. So on the left side, you'll see that we have teachers A through P. We organize them however it works. Sometimes it works that you have kindergarten through 5th grade, and then if you're working with any special areas or special education teachers, you can categorize them in there as well. But then this here is taking what you tracked, if I go back, all of the types of coaching that you did for your teacher, you're now putting in this nice little drop down that actually shows how many times you did each type of that coaching. Then it'll do a running tally for you so you can actually see how many times you worked with a coach. Our district is really focusing that every single teacher is getting coaching. They are not necessarily looking for that 14 to 20 hours, but my ISD is, and so that's why we left that time piece on our tracking form. The other piece that we added that our superintendent actually likes, even though it's our take, we are getting teacher feedback as well, is that coaching willingness. So how willing are they to work with you? As a coach, we all know and have met that resistant teacher. And then you also have the teacher that comes to you for everything. Hey, I found this, can you help me? I want to learn more about it. So when it came to how do you determine who's resistant and who is fully internalizing and utilizing a coach, we came up with this rubric, which is to the right there, the coaching willingness rubric. And it was created with a little bit of research from Dr. Fox Resnick about the phases that people go through with change. So the supervisor I had at the time kind of put it together and then presented it to our coaching team, and we kind of changed the wording a little bit to make it work for what we wanted it to. So you can see that we have a 1 to 4 scale based on how much interaction they're getting with the coach. Yes.
Side-by-side and co-observation.
Yes.
They're just terms some people aren't familiar
Perfect. So a side-by-side coaching is that I'm actually standing side by side with a teacher, and I do, and then they do. So it's kind of uncomfortable. It's not one that a lot of teachers go to. But if it's necessary for a teacher that's really struggling with something, then you can jump in and help with that. I've actually am using it with a teacher with some classroom management pieces. Another one that's kind of a different variation of the side-by-side is like the coach on the side. So the teacher's actually standing here and the coach is sitting over here and then giving that feedback directly as the lesson's happening. And what was the other one? Co-observation. This one has been really popular this year for me specifically. It's when you take a teacher into another teacher's classroom and you're observing something specifically. If you're part of kind of like a learning lab, I know that's the new thing this year, especially if you're part of the Early Math Network. But it's so powerful. How many times have teachers come to you and said, I want to see how they do that? Or you're in your brain going, oh, I wish you could see this teacher did a great lesson and I got to see it and I want other people to see it. And so really taking that person in there that it's intentional. I create a note catcher for them and we talk about, okay, when we go in, we're going to look what the teacher's doing, what the student is doing, and what the outcome is. It's also important if you're doing that co-observation that you do a debrief with that classroom teacher so that your guest teacher coming in to observe can understand, why are we doing this? How did you get this? What were your tricks? And how do you, educators, we beg, borrow, and steal. Don't recreate the wheel. So I hope that clarifies. Okay, so going back to our coach willingness, we rank it on a 1 to 4 scale. The report that we are currently using in my district, there are actually 2 coaches, and we go from year to year to year. So our superintendent likes to see if they were resistant in year 1, we're now in year 4 with this particular district. If they were resistant, have we been able to get in their classroom and really support them? And if not, then he's looking at having that intentional conversation with building leadership and saying, hey, this is not okay. It's also helpful if we see that there's a teacher who maybe was a 3 or a 4 and something changed and they've dipped down into, minimally internalizing it. Having those intentional conversations has really been eye-opening, and we're just really grateful that we have such a supportive leadership team. Makes our job a lot easier. The last 2 columns, one is for our districts that use Acadians, and the other one is for NWEA. So we're taking the percentage of students who met their goal and reporting that to the district. Yes, we know that they can go look up every individual teacher, but we put it in one spot. So now the leadership team can see how many different interactions with coaching they've had. They can look at and see how willing they were to participate in coaching, and they can see how many students are meeting their goal at the end of the year. This is another one that we've added year after year with our teachers. It's helpful when the teachers are consistent. Obviously, we all have turnover, so that kind of can cause a little bit of a rift in the data, but for the most part, it's been really eye-opening. One story that I can share that was eye-opening for our district leaders, we implemented a new Tier 1 reading curriculum, and it wasn't mandatory. It was optional that first year, so you can imagine. When I presented my data, I had 2 teachers in my building, and they were the only 2 teachers in the whole district that chose to not do the new curriculum at all. Didn't even unbox it. It reflected. The amount of coaching was lower, and their student growth was lower than everybody else's. And as soon as we sat down to the table, and it's anonymous. I don't even bring the sheet to tell me who's who because I don't want to slip up and tell them, this is so-and-so. And the superintendent and the curriculum director looked at me and they said, why is that different? And I said, I can't tell you who it is, but just know that when we didn't have an intentional implementation guide, it's now reflecting in our data. And they were like, Okay, we know. So it was just different ways to see different data pieces and the intentionality that we have to have moving forward. Something else that I left up on the bottom here was one of our districts has asked to define the years of experience for some of the teachers, just to see who the more willing participants were, to see if they could find out, is it our veteran teachers or the new teachers are kind of the mid-range. So that's another option that we could add. This is an example that you can see with actual data. This is a snapshot of one of our actual coaching ones that was presented. So you can see that the drop downs are color-coded to align with our coaching rubric on the right. So you can see, for example, that teacher B at first had high internalization, but it was always me going to them saying, hey, it's time, like, have you thought about this? I noticed this when we had our data meeting or our child study. And then the year after that, they were coming to me for everything. Hey, I have this kiddo who's doing this, and I've tried this, this, and this. What can we do to help? Most of them increased for this example, but you can also see the NWEA percentage for most of them was above that 50th percentile. Or not 50th percentile, but the 50% in student growth. The reason there's not an NWEA percent for the first teacher is that is one of my special ed teachers. So they don't have a classroom of their own. They're just a resource room teacher that supports. So keep that in mind too, that sometimes it doesn't fit for every teacher. So the next thing that we take into consideration is we need our teacher input. And so our ISD actually created a survey that we provide our teachers usually in the spring, about April or May, that is really about how they utilize their coach and providing us any feedback. So this is just a screenshot of the Google form, but this first question aligns directly with how the teacher is internalizing coaching that they're participating in. So we do send the survey out anonymously because we feel like the teachers are more honest. So we don't always get to align what they're feeling with what we are feeling they are at. But you can compare the pie chart at the end and kind of see where everybody is at as a whole. So just seeing how their values align. I'm sorry, this is not the internalization question. This is from our center-wide practices, what they're focusing on, which is interesting as a team. And you can scroll down a little bit. I went ahead of myself. So basically it's asking, how well do you understand the role of your coach, which is really eye-opening and kind of reminds me of your, who knows what our coaching really is. One of my colleagues recently had a teacher who said, you mean you can do more than assess? Yeah. But it is true if they don't realize it. And with staff turnover, we need to constantly put that in front of people. How well are they, how comfortable are they coming to your coach? And then that next one is that internalization that I kind of jumped to. So are they participating, not participating? Are they doing the minimal? So it's always interesting to see where they also put themselves. And then the last couple questions are just open-ended to share coaching responses and any additional thoughts. And on every survey that I've had, teachers are putting something. And sometimes it's just nice at the end of the year when you're like, did I really make an impact? Did I do it? Yes, the numbers are there, but did I make an impact? And so it's just another way to collect information. We've logged it. We've created our report. We have our data from our teachers and from our local district data. So now we create what's called our coaching plan. And the plan that we created, all of our coaches have done it, and some, there's a folder that has other reports that Michelle has gathered from around the state that we can look at in just a moment. But I wanted to walk through, if you would click the 35A Linwood example. So we create these plans, and then we take them and share them with our district leadership. And so our principal, we share them with our curriculum director, our superintendent, My principal this year actually brought it out at our first staff meeting, so teachers are finally getting to see it. Our hope is that they're taking out to our board members as well. I can't speak to if that is really happening or not, but that is our hope. So all of our coaching plans are similar. We always have a little blurb about our school district that we're servicing. So this particular one is for all of the Pinconning area schools, which has 2 elementaries, and it breaks it down into the students as well. So then the next section is kind of their literacy coach journey. At the ISD, we started with 1 coach who serviced all of the districts and just kind of floated around and helped as needed. And then each year we've gotten a little bit bigger, which has been wonderful. And so we like to keep track of that. So you'll see as the coaching names change and what the model looks like. And then the next piece are the celebrations. So our celebrations can come from a couple of places. One of them was if you participate in literacy rounds or affinity mapping, or if you've done any learning labs that can come out of that. If you're not doing those, pulling any celebrations that you have in your district. If you've adopted a new curriculum and implemented it, if you've increased the books in the libraries, in classroom libraries, like truly reflecting and celebrating all of those wins that we have had throughout the year. The next page, it would actually be the second part here. These 2 boxes are quotes that we pulled directly from the survey. So they're obviously anonymous, but it's still good to share out what teachers are experiencing through coaching. And then we have our coaching focus, which comes again from a couple different pathways. If you're doing the literacy rounds, it can come right directly from there. If you've done any affinity mapping, that's another avenue that our local districts have used. Sometimes it's just the district coming and saying, hey, our scores look really poorly on M-STEP and writing, so we're going to hit writing this time and really focus on that. Once we take our coaching focus, we also have our staff survey of those 2 questions about how comfortable they are coming to the coach and their understanding of the coach. This particular person also put the level of internalization. So we have the freedom to kind of play with what report we want to put on the report from our staff survey. This is just a big celebration that this particular district had, and they wanted to do it. It's a huge one. Having a lot of money to increase our classroom library is $10,000 grant. Now getting down to the data piece. So this is the opportunity to show our cohorts and what they're doing with that coaching. So looking at our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, particularly because of M-STEP, and then it is showing their proficiency across, and then also comparing it to the FastBridge assessment data. So then this is just going to keep going into different schools and what their data story looks like. So all of that tracking, all of the collection allows us to put this together and provide it saying, this is why coaching's working in our district. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And it's just a nice snapshot that we can finally celebrate and share it with all stakeholders. It's really eye-opening having conversations, even across different buildings within our district.
So then I wanted to revisit, I know some of you explored the My Coach Compass earlier. Just wanted to revisit this with you to give you a little bit more context. So Erin Pell from MAISA is the lead on this project. She also supports the My Strategy Bank and My Read. So she is part of all of that work, and she is a former literacy coach. So it's great to have someone who's walked in the shoes of a coach driving what the platform looks like. She's also extremely receptive to the feedback of the work we've done as a team. So if we ask her if it can do something, she usually can make it do it. So right now she has, I believe, 6 ISDs that are piloting this with coaches. Is anyone in the pilot in the room? Okay, I won't be able to tell you all the names, but I do know that there's about 6 of them. So the feedback has been great. Erin's been working with those districts to make some tweaks and really make it user-friendly. It is a free resource, so that's important for you to know. We are funding it using some of the 35A grant funding, and knowing that it's an important part of the work you do. It would be a tool that would be accessible to you if you have an ISD champion for the work. So you have to really think about how you can do this systematically if it's something you want to explore. So, going back to your ISD and saying, hey, all of our coaches really are asking to have this streamlined tool. Could we talk about getting this in place for next year? It sounds like they will be ready to rock and roll next year with the spring kind of onboarding, which is why we want to get it in front of GELN in February. Erin's going to be in front of GELN in March. And then by May, if we know who's interested, we should be able to launch with all the districts that would like to, or all the ISDs that would like to. I did put Erin's contact info on here, but it's also on the flyer that you have. You have the page linked and the website linked, but I took a couple screenshots just to give you a visual. So you can see activity type and the literacy essentials like in this colorful pie graph. So we've got, the assessment, literacy, co-planning, conferencing, modeling, observing, post-conference, pre-conference. So you could see by coach or by school. So you can see this on different cascades. So if we were looking at this and it was by coach, this coach has spent 28% of her time or his time observing, and then 20% co-planning. And then as far as what essentials they've been focusing on, 22% on motivation and engagement and 20% on letter sound relationships. So we're able to really see a bigger picture of, I gave a good example over here that Erin and I talked about. If we see read alouds is 80 to 90% and letter sound relationships is 0, we might have a good opportunity to talk with that coach on, I know you're out there doing read alouds and that's great, you're building relationships. Maybe it's time to start thinking about more explicit skill instruction and how we might coach around that. It just gives that point of opportunity. It's also a portal that teachers can have access to. They only get their own coaching data in there, but it's an opportunity for you to go back and forth with a teacher. So they can type things in there, you can type things in there, and you get a really nice narrative, and then the pie graphs to kind of go along with that. So just something to consider as we're thinking about things. This is the percentage view, but you can also look at the hours view. So when we were talking about that research around 14 to 20 hours, we could just kind of see here where the hours are for each of the literacy essentials being focused on. All right, so then really our last part of the day here, we want to take you through just thinking about how to tell our story. Some of you may know that the Math Network has done a really nice job getting specific successes out there in the public eye. So they do an essentials in action, they do some newsletters. And so I have been working very closely with Rusty, trying to really parallel the work we're doing and streamline so that it doesn't feel like it's two separate initiatives and it feels much more aligned. So the first couple things on here, there is click on the sharing our stories form first, Liberty, if you would. So this is a Google form that is open and available right now. It'll be shared at Early Literacy Task Force and GELN. And it just goes through, those are my sample X's in there, so ignore that right now. But when you click on it, you'll be able to go through and you'll be able to add any story you have, anything you've got going on that's been a big celebration. Talk about it, share it with us, send some pictures. This is going to be part of our MAISA newsletter that goes out every month. So we would love to have our stories from the field be your stories. So the best way to do that is to have you all thinking about submitting what that looks like. We'll also have it on our website so that it's really easy to access and available. And if you go back to the slides and click on the communication points, and it's a canvas, you might just have to make it bigger, yeah. So this is a document that was put together long ago by Susan Townsend when this work all started. We've done a revision through Early Literacy Task Force, and it's really just this 2-page document to give the field and understanding of the communication points around the essentials. So as you scroll through it, you'll see, go down a little bit, you'll see what we've added right there, the MDE and Michigan Literacy Connections. That is the document that connects it's the crosswalk between letters and the essentials. So we've linked that. We've linked the 10 essential district commitments. And if you go down to the next, you're going to see all the suite of essentials are linked and all the ways you might hear them referred to. So EIPs, literacy practices, literacy essentials, just really trying to create like that common understanding of how we reference these practices. And then at the very bottom, we've got our social media sites, our sharing our stories form, an open email address there for anybody who is looking for more information. But it's really just kind of our way to promote the essentials and gather stories from the field across the state. Thank you so much for a great day and a great session. You all have been great. It's been nice to be in person, and I hope you avoid any weather on your travels home. So thank you.